Hello, folks. JB here. There's been a couple of things on my mind about, for what I've been seeing, far as people, in their finances and building wealth and that kind of stuff. You know, early retirement, just getting some money in the pocket, whatever. And what I've been seeing on these YouTube channels, and there've been some good ones, but they generally look towards, you know, this is what I wish I should have done, or what I could have done. Well, I haven't retired yet. So I'm gonna start talking about what is leading up to my decision to retire and how I built my wealth, whatever my number is. You have your number, I have my number. And what I found out is people don't really talk about in the moment. So I'm gonna start talking about in the moment. So let's get right to it. So when I was younger, I had a paper route. Okay, it was like 9 or 10. The paper was like 90 cents a week. Sometimes people would give you $1 and let you keep the dime. Sometimes they wouldn't. And I remember getting that paper route, and my grandfather and my father. My grandfather told my father when he was younger, and then they both told me when I was around 9 or 10. Whenever I had that paper route, and they were trying to tell me how to save. And what my grandfather said was, or to my father told me, and then they both told me. My father said, "Son," he said, "every man, when he gets his pay, he should spend something on himself first." And he said, even if you go out and get you a pack of cigarettes, a newspaper, and a soda. So I'm like, what? I said, "Pops, I don't smoke. Like, what?" But if you know, you know. When you're raised in certain types of neighborhoods and you come up and it's a tough neighborhood, a lot of, especially a lot of the black neighborhoods, we tend to talk in riddles. You have to understand. You have to use your mind. You have to use logic to understand a lot of basically the lingo in the hood. So I'm trying to understand what he means by that. And he starts to explain to me, and I didn't get it back then. And he told me again when I got a car wash job when I was like 14. He says, if you go out and you bring every single dime that you have into the house and never spend anything on yourself, it's not going to be good for you in the future. He said a man is going to get kind of restless not having a dime in his pocket. So I'm like, all right, what does he mean? So now let's put that in perspective. Okay. I don't know how much, you know, that would equate to today, but back then, like I said, a week's worth of newspapers was 90 cents. So if you divide that by 7, that's about 12 cents a newspaper. So 12.5 cents. So let's go with 12 cents. So 12 cents a newspaper. A soda was 25 cents, and a pack of cigarettes I think he smoked was 60 cents at that time. So let's go with, for the week, we're gonna get a week's worth of papers. That's 90 cents plus 60 cents is $1.50 plus 25 cents. Okay, so essentially he said take $1.75, spend it on yourself. $1.75. Now, when I first made that comment, I'm sure a lot of people were out there. No, that's how people get in trouble. They spend all their money on themselves. But again, as I told you, when you're raised in certain types of neighborhoods, when you have sayings like, you know, somebody will say, "You already know," and they didn't even say anything, but they say, "You already know," or "It is what it is." You know, so there's like a lot of little sayings, a lot of little things that they said back in the hood that you just had to understand. And so I started understanding, and I'm trying to help you, enlighten you, turn you on to some game. But basically, he was saying take $1.75. So let's say that my salary on 36 customers, let's say I got $1 from each customer. That's $36. $36 a week. $36 a week is $72 every 2 weeks. I'm going to go by the year 1980 because we want to make it just an even number. In the year 1980, if I got a $72 paycheck every 2 weeks, how much would that equate to in the year 2026? All right, it says a $72 paycheck every 2 weeks would be $290.99 today. That's $290 for a 9-year-old kid. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if you have a 9-year-old kid, 9-year-old grandkid, niece, nephew, if they brought home $300 every 2 weeks, you would be like, wow, that's not bad. Of that $300 every 2 weeks, you're telling them they need to spend $5 on themselves. That's basically what my grandfather was telling me. Okay. So that lesson right there was the number one lesson for the remaining 4 lessons that I've gotten in my life. Pay yourself first, and it was a small amount. It was not a very big amount. Number two, the second best lesson that I ever got was from the job. So I had, a couple jobs here and there, but when I got older and I got my real corporate job, um, I had a guy there. And let me set this story for you. He was, if you old heads out there remember Happy Days, okay? Um, there was a guy on there called Arthur Fonzarelli. They called him the Fonz. Wore black leather jacket, feathered back hair, white guy. Well, this guy looked just like the Fonz, except he had salt and pepper hair, but he had the slender face, the same hairstyle, and he was my director. Okay, and just to give you a setting on how that worked, is like in the company you probably have like customer service and some levels in there. Some people go into the IT department and have the help desk, and there's levels in there, and then the help desk passed the call to the next level of support and the next level of support. Well, he was the director, so he was way up here. Okay. And so when I came in and I'm sitting on the floor and I'm doing my work, and this was within the first week that I was there, he came up to me and he said, JB, and he talked real cool. Okay, you got to understand this guy. He had $200 white shirts that was always pressed with this collar, black pants. He always drove like a sporty Cadillac. Every 2 years, get a new Cadillac. And he comes up to me and he said, hey, JB. He said, are you invested in 401k? So now me, coming from where I'm coming from, we weren't too trusting. And so, but I could just tell this guy was nice. He was a good guy. But, I got my, I'm on alert because I'm like, what is he talking about? Is he talking about some kind of, new software that they're going to, put into place to put us out of a job? Is he talking about, and I'm thinking, did I put something on my application or my resume that made him think that I know something called 401k? Never heard the term 401k. You get where I'm going? So I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I've never heard the term 401k, what is this guy talking about? So what he did was he could tell that I didn't know, and I'm like looking at him like, I don't think I know what you're talking about. He said, come to my office after 5 o'clock today, 15 minutes, and you can be on your way, but I gotta, tell you something. And I'm like, all right, I've only been there just days, right? I go to his office. I said, hey, Ed, you told me to come by your office. So he sits down, he had a couple pieces of paper out, and he was like, John, 401k is an investment tool. He said, you have to invest in this. So now I'm like, all right, they trying to get money out of me. And he just had a few words written on a piece of paper that he gave me. And he said, the way this works is, at the time, I think the company was matching like 4%. And then a year or so later, it went to 6%. But let's just take the 6%. He was like, if you get $1,000 in your pay, before taxes, and you put 6% in, the company will give you 6%. So, like I said, I'm from a place where you had to learn, you had to be quick witted, you had to understand terms that weren't terms and stuff like that. So, if you notice, back in the hood, all of the leaders weren't the 6'8", 300-pound guys. It was always the guys that were smart, especially smart with numbers and who could understand, talk quick witted. So I'm like, okay, what is this guy talking about? I'm like, so you're telling me $60, they're gonna give me $60? And he was like, yes. He said, you put this $60 in this bucket, they're gonna give you $60 and it's yours. Nobody can touch it. And I'm like, for real? And so he showed me the paperwork and he showed me online. So this 15-minute conversation went into about an hour and a half that this guy spent with me, telling me I need to invest in 401k. Every time I get a raise, I need to put a percentage in. He said, you get a 2% raise, you put in 1%. You get a 3% raise, you put in 1%, 1.5%. You get a 4% raise, you put in 2%. He said, whenever you get a raise, you always put something in there. And I'm thinking to myself, okay. I said, how do I gain money from it? I said, because I can just put it in the savings. He said, no, they're going to buy stock. It's going to be invested and reinvested. He said, we're expecting the company to do some stock splitting. Now he's talking way over my head because I knew what I knew, but I did not know a thing about that stock and investment stuff, right? But him taking out that time to spend an hour and a half with me, basically with a guy that he did not know, all of these people on the floor. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, I need to take a chance with this. Basically he was like, let payroll do the heavy lifting for your future. He said, there's other things that you may need with this. He said, you may have some kids down the line or something like that. You may want to borrow against your 401k. Well, it will have built up. Then you can borrow and pay yourself back to help you with that kid, but you're paying yourself back. You don't have to go get yourself into debt. And I'll have another video on how all of that works. But that was another one of the tips that he gave me. And I'm thinking to myself, it was like automatic investing, right, through payroll. I'm thinking to myself, wow. So I ended up getting a lot of respect for this guy. Lots of respect because, he turned me on the game and I was like, wow. Within, and I don't know the numbers right now, I can go back and check, but let's say I put in $2,000 that year. When I look back again, and I remember just forgetting about it, just keep adding, and I looked and I said, oh, I got $2,000 in there. But when I seen that $2,000 turned to $6,000 and like that, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I need to call the HR department or benefits department so I can see how I can get this money or what's involved with this money. And that's when I started kind of teaching myself about it. Number 3 rule that I found out, and it's becoming more and more prevalent today, a few years before I retire, is cash is king. Now, what does that mean in my terms? Well, you got your money out there. You got your credit cards with no balances on them. You got your 401k. You got CDs. You got different things. You got your house. Maybe you paid your house off. But what I found out is if you have cash, and I'm going to take round figures. Let's say currently you live off of $50,000 a year. Your essentials is $50,000 a year. Rent, car note, property insurance, property tax, car insurance, lights, gas, water, whatever. Let's say it's 50,000. All right. And let's say you make 100,000. So we just made it even. You make 100,000, you live off 50,000. Well, what I'm started figuring out as far as, when you're going to be off work, you have to learn how to play the tax game. Now, that might be retirement. You might want to quit early, whatever. But let's take retirement. If you have $100,000 cash, and when I say cash, I'm talking like money market cash. So you put it in money market, you get 4%, but you can take it out daily. All right. So that $100,000 is sitting there making 4% a year. All round figures for right now. So on that 100,000, it's going to be worth 104 at the end of the year if you don't touch it. So let's say on January 1st, you retire. You could live off of that 100,000 because you only need 50,000 to live for 2 years. All right. What you essentially have done is you have not collected an income for those 2 years. So you don't have to pay taxes. So when you were making $100,000 a year, you were paying 25% taxes on that $100,000. Well, if you have that just sitting over here in a money market account that you can get at any time, and you just take out only the 50,000 that you need, for 2 years, essentially your next year's income is zero because you've already paid taxes on that 100,000 on there when you were building it up over the last 10, 15 years. Avoiding those taxes for 2 years allows your 401k to keep growing. It allows, like I said, if your house is paid off, it allows your house, hopefully, to keep going up in value. You've made $4,000 to $8,000 in interest on the money market. Now you may have to pay taxes on that 4,000 to 8,000, but that's under 10%. You might pay $800. So I found out that cash is king in those regards. But what really made me understand that cash is king, even years ago when I had did an investment, is if that cash is liquid, if you can get to that cash immediately, if the stock market goes down, let's say Meta or TikTok or any of these, Coca-Cola, any of these strong companies, say the market crashes and all of that stock goes down to 50%. If you got 100K sitting over here, you can take 10, 15, 20K, however much. Let's say you take 10K and go buy that Coca-Cola stock or that Tesla stock or whatever. And there is a great chance that when the stock market bounces back, that Tesla, that Coca-Cola, that Amazon, when the stock market bounces back, your $10,000 is going to turn into way more than $10,000. And that's what happened with me. I had money on hand when the housing market crashed. And I seen homes at the time that were selling for $200,000 being sold for $35,000. I got one house for $13,000. In the past, it had sold for like $130,000. Now we're talking 15 years ago, but the point being is I had cash on hand to go out and buy a $30,000 house. I had cash on hand to go out and buy that $13,000 house. Let's go back one step when I told you that Ed told me that I could borrow against the 401k. One of the homes I borrowed against the 401k, fixed that house up super nice, flipped it, paid myself back, not the bank, paid myself back by putting that money back in my 401k, took $10,000 out and put the rest even more in the 401k, and it built up more. So what I found out on my own is cash is king. Cash is king for a rainy day, bro. Not all your cash. I can't tell you what percentage cash is king, but having a lump sum somewhere is definitely king. The next thing that I found out that came in, and these are pretty much in order. You want to try to build you a high income career. What do I mean by build a high income career? I mean, whatever profession that you are in, do not let anybody outwork you. Don't let it happen. The two things, there's three things. You got your name, and that's connected to quality, and then effort. You make sure that your effort and high quality work is paramount, is big. If you're at work and you have to give a presentation, your presentation shouldn't just be a bunch of words talking and trying to hustle people. You need to have visuals. You want people to understand that you put time and effort into that whatever you're telling them about. If you are like when I had my paper route, I didn't just throw an open paper up there. I would sit down and I would wrap that paper up and put a rubber band around it. And I would use two rubber bands on both ends. So if I couldn't get into one of the homes because they had a gate with a dog, when I threw that paper, it landed on the porch and the person's paper just didn't blow everywhere. You need to have work ethic. You know, when I worked at a place called Chamois Shine Car Wash, okay, long out of business. You know, a lot of older guys worked there. I was 14. A lot of older guys worked there. A lot of them just got out of jail, you know, issues, whatever. But they would work the front line. And, you know, as people came by, you know, they put tips in the jar. I would never get any of the tips. So, you know, I'm the young guy on there. They're hustling me, whatever. So I figured out that I could go to the end of the line and I could use Armor All and shine people's mats and tires and get all of the tip to myself. So at the end of the day, when they started giving out doing the tip jar, let's say in the tip jar there's $75 in there and there's 6 of us working, for whatever reason I would only get $2 or $3 out that jar. But because I was shining these tires and mats at the end, I'd have $10, $12 extra from that. Because the older guys was hustling the young buck. You know what I'm saying? That's just what happens, right? But my point behind all of that is it was quality. So you build your career in whatever you do, even if sometimes you may have to take a loss to give quality and great work ethic. That will pay you so much more than just money. And first of all, it's going to pay you a lot of money because people are going to spread your name. You could be in a corporate life. You could be a plumber. You could be whatever. In corporate, let me explain to you what I used to do in corporate. And I know this video is a little bit long, but I feel people need to hear this. In corporate, I wanted to move up. So how did I figure out how to do that? Remember, going back to my surroundings and where I grew up, you always had to find the angle. Nobody told you anything without some kind of a old Southern riddle. Or I'm from Pittsburgh, you know, but the older folks came from Georgia, North Carolina, those areas, Florida. You know, came up to the steel mills and the auto plants back in the day in the 20s and 30s. And so I had to figure it out, right? So I was like, how am I going to get promoted? Because I was in a field where it was probably less than 1% that were black people. And especially in a leadership position. Like when I first started at this particular company, I don't believe there was one black manager. I don't think so. But anyway, so how am I going to get ahead? Well, what I figured out was I was at a second level. I wanted to get to the third level. How do I get to the third level? How do I get to management? What I found out was a lot of the guys who did the work didn't like meeting all the time. So my position, I worked in IT, and they hate having meetings and taking notes and going back. They just wanted to go do IT stuff and be done. So what I would do is I would tell those guys, hey man, can I come to your meeting? I'll take the notes. They called it a scriber. I said, I'll take the notes. Once I take the notes, I'll go back to my desk. I'll type them all up, make it nice, spell check it, put it through everything. I'll send it to you so you can send it out in your name to the group. Everybody went for it. Everybody went for it. But what that did was that told me what was going on in the company at a higher level than what I was. I always knew what was going to come down on us from being in those higher level meetings. And it's like, oh, so they're going to bring in a new software next year. All right, what I can do is I can start looking into that software this year. So I'll be well versed in it by the time it comes in. Because they don't tell you right away when they're looking into it. They tell you when it's almost ready to be implemented. The other thing was it made me known. They would pass my name around, man, you got to have all these meetings. They're like, JB, he doesn't mind coming to the meetings taking notes. He'll take notes and give them back to you. Look at these notes that he took from me. Yes. Yes. And I built a strong career out of knowing how to navigate and reading the room and following patterns and seeing that this is what's going to get me ahead. So that's the number 4 thing. Build you a strong career no matter what you got. And you got to build it with your name and your work ethic and your quality of work. Okay? The last thing that I think that was best was I got some advice on learning how to avoid the inflation. There's a lot of people going around telling you that it's cheaper to be in an apartment than a house, and then they'll tell you it's cheaper to be in a house than an apartment and all of that kind of stuff. But what I always thought was good for me, and I can't tell you how good it is to either not have a car note or a very low car note and to pay off my house as quickly as possible. Which leads back to what I told you, having cash is king. You pay your house off as quickly as possible. All of these line up to each other. So let's go from number 5. Right? Number 5 is trying to avoid, big bills, inflation, all this kind of stuff. So if I pay off my car and I pay off my house, now I got more money to invest in a cash bucket, money market, and a 401k. And if you think about it, that goes back to the career thing. If I have a strong career, I have the money to pay some of those things off. Or I have the confidence to say, I'm going to put a little extra money over here because I'm strong in this career. Even if they lay me off, I'm good with this. I can go over here and get this. But that number 5, man, is big. When you pay off your house and you have that extra money, there is something about when somebody tells you, hey, we're going on a family cruise. We want all of the family to show up. But there's something about knowing that you will not be paying a late fee or being kicked out of your home or apartment or your home or your condo if it's paid off. It's paid off, bro. And if it's paid off, I would recommend having that paid off by the time you turn 50 years old. Why do I say have it paid off by the time you're 50 years old? If you think you know why I said that, put it in the comments real quick. But the reason why I say pay that off when you're 50 years old is you're going to make the most money in your life probably around 55 to retirement. You are going to be in your career X amount of time, and that's when most people make the most money in their life. Now tell me this. Do you want a paid off house when you make the most money in your life, or do you want something paid off or a low apartment when you're 23 and you're just getting started and you're making minimum wage or barely above it? If your home is paid off by the time you get to around 50, 52, and then you come in and you start making the bigger salaries from that time to retirement. Let's say you want to retire early. I recommend no one works to 65 or 70. I say work to 60, 61 tops. It's just personal. But let's say that you do that. You will, if it's paid off by 50, 52, you basically have 8 years of high earning that you can put towards other things. What I did was, in those 8 years of high earning and having the house paid off, I upgraded the kitchen. I had the money to do it. Upgrading the kitchen raises the value of the house. It's a no-brainer to me. So when I do get to that 62 years old or 65 years old or 67 years old, like, you know, when you're 52, 53, and 15 years from now and you got that stuff going, you are in such a better shape. But let's say you retire at 60 years old, your house is paid off, you put in a new kitchen, maybe you did a bathroom or something like that. You got money, extra money that you're throwing into your money market account. You got extra money you're throwing into your 401k. And at 60, 61 years old, you retire. And you don't have to take any money out the 401k for 2 years. And your house is valued more because you put in a new kitchen or bathroom or whatever you did. You could sell the house, keep the house, whatever. But you've just set yourself up for an amazing financial retirement. So those are the 5 things that I wanted to tell you about building wealth. Spend some money on yourself first. Make just a little bit of money. Put money into your 401k, like my director told me. Have some cash on hand. Build your career. And no matter what the career is, work hard at it and do quality work. And pay off those bills. See, there's one thing that people don't understand when you're paying off bills and putting money into a savings account, and that might be for another video. But the more money that you put into your house and you put into your 401k and you put into your savings account, the less money it is at the club or the bar. Keeps you out the streets, bro. All right, this has been JB. I've talked your ear off. I'll holler. Peace.